Hello everybody and welcome to this video, which is a summary of the Bibbulmun Trail. In this video I'm going to be going through a few of my statistics, cover the logistics for the trail and look at how the trail affected my body. The Bibbulmun Trail was a really enjoyable trail. I went into it expecting it would be an easy trail with lots of road walking. And it was this, but it was really enjoyable. There's a lot of time on roads, but these were mainly dirt forest trails, which were remote and had almost no traffic. Because they were remote and largely in the forest, they didn't feel like road walks, just like walking on really wide trails. I also started to enjoy being on the roads because I didn't have to look at my footing, and it gave me more time to look at the wildlife and vegetation instead. There were several lovely sections of single track. Most of them were pretty easy, but a few were rougher, and there were even a couple of places where the navigation was a challenge, but with the Far Out app this wasn't a problem. The shelters were excellent, and knowing exactly where there was going to be water was really helpful for planning. While shelter style hiking is not my preferred means because it forces shorter or longer days than I'd naturally like, it was nice to see the shelter and know that you had a night of comfort and shelter from the rain. The other nice thing about the trail is a short time between resupplies, except for the first section, but this can be shortened. Also, the resupply locations were on trail and most had decent supermarkets, for the logistics was easy. I'll now go into the statistics of my hike. Every night on trail I would update my spreadsheet, and this format is the same one I've used since my very first through hike 10 years ago, and I find it covers most of the data that I am personally interested in. I was on trail a total of 32 days. There were 2 0 days where I did not hike at all, 4 narrow days, which I walked less than half a day, and 26 full days of hiking. My longest day was day 30, walking from William Bay Shelter to Nilakai Shelter, and most of this day was on sealed roads. My shortest day was day 28, hiking from Mount Clare Shelter to Walpole. It was downhill and there was the draw of a hot breakfast. The weather was also not very good. I averaged 32.9 kilometres a day and walking 8 hours a day over the entire 32 days. If I take into account only full hiking days, my average was 36.1 kilometres and just over 9 hours a day. My fastest day was day 19 when I did 25.1 kilometres from Bibbulmun Shelter to Pemberton, and I did 4.9 kilometres an hour. This was a day that was 3/4 on forest tracks and it rained all day, so I didn't stop very often. My slowest day was day 2, covering 27 kilometres as I was easing into hiking and trying to get my trail legs. Of the 31 nights on trail, 23 nights, or 74% of the time, was in shelters. 3 nights were in motels, 3 nights in campground cabins, and I included Donnelly River accommodation in this category. There's 1 night in a tent in a commercial campground and 1 night a homestay with a trail angel. Of the nights I was in shelters, I was by myself 30% of the time. I had up to 5 people 44% of the time, and over 5 people 26% of the time. I had planned 4 resupply locations on the trail, and I was happy with this amount. It did mean a long first section, which meant a heavier pack as I was getting my trail legs, but it wasn't too bad. This first section could be shortened by hitching or getting a resupply packaged, either at kilometre 70 on the Brickton Highway, or either kilometre 100 or kilometre 134 on the Albany Highway. This last point, 134k, there is a 1.5 side trail to Gringa Creek Shelter, and that is where I had wine and cheese that was delivered by Catherine, the wife of fellow hiker Roger, as a Father's Day surprise. Later that night I had a second dinner when another hiker sister delivered McDonald's to the nearest road. All of the locations except Bibbulmun had full supermarkets, and Walpole even had freeze-dry meals and gas at the information centre. Bibbulmun was the worst resupply location as there was only a small shop attached to the service station or servo or fuel station, but it still had a good range of snacks and enough noodles and lunch supplies for me to get through to Pemberton. Despite the lack of store, it was a very good place to stop for lunch, as there were some lovely cafes there. Water on trail was fairly easy, as there is water at every shelter, except Murray Shelter, which had issues with the water tank. But luckily the Murray River is right next to the hut. I see in the Far Out app comments that this was fixed. There were a few creeks along the trail, but they were pretty few and far between, so it was mainly just the shelters where I refilled. For expenses, I spent a total of 2,547 New Zealand dollars. 57% of this was for food, 22% for accommodation, 12% for transport. This transport was a lot, and that was the airfare flying from Albany to get back to Perth. The transport from Perth to get out to the start of the trail was less than $5, and it was just a single bus. Joining the Trail Foundation helps support the track and shelter maintenance, and I strongly recommend people do this, as the facilities are amazing. The gear cost was just a gas canister at the start of the trail. Not included in this were my shoes, but the shoes held up well for the trail and would be good for another 700 kilometres after it, but I had to replace them as I was doing the Hyson Trail straight afterwards, and I didn't want to replace them mid-Hyson Trail. The miscellaneous costs are my travel insurance and the Far Out app, which I used for navigation. My gear did not change during the hike. After doing so many through hikes, my gear is pretty well dialed in now. I did a video of the gear I used for this trail, which you can see here. I started with 6.37 kilograms or 14.04 pounds, which is everything less food and water. This included an average of the consumables I used, such as toilet paper, sunscreen and hand sanitizer. So the actual start weight was closer to 6.4 kg or 14.1 pounds. If I take the pure base weight, which doesn't include consumables, then the weight is 5.92 kilos or 13.06 pounds. This is the detailed list of all of my gear. I've broken it down to the main categories. So we've got shelter, which was my homemade tent. Then we have the sleeping system, and I use the Z-Packs sleeping bag. My cooking system, main thing is a Primus Micron stove, and it's a gas-based system. Then looking at my clothing system, my electronics, miscellaneous. Despite the short trail, I still lost weight. Usually it's around the 2-month mark that I start losing a lot of weight, but in the 32 days I did lose a couple of kilos, and that was a combination of losing fat and gaining muscle. The more telling indicators are the loss of 10 centimetres around my bust, and that is both from my upper back and breasts. Unfortunately for me, it's the first place I lose weight from, the last place it comes back on. My stomach lost 6 centimetres and the widest part of my hips lost 5 centimetres. That's enough statistics. Now I'll just go over a final summary answering a few questions about the trail. So the first question is, did I enjoy the trail? And the answer is yes, much more than I was expecting to. It was a lovely trail, lovely scenery, interesting and different vegetation. Got to see a few weird looking animals, some snakes, and beautiful scenery. The shelters were great, logistics were easy, and yeah, it was a really enjoyable trail. My favourite part was probably day 4, going up and over Mount Cook. There was some nice single track. I was up high, beautiful views, some navigation, and obviously that's my thing. The rougher the trail, the more interesting I find it. And I think also it was really nice being along the beach every now and again. Little bit of single track there as well. So day 4 and sort of the last few days by the beach. My least favourite part would have to be day 30, the long road walk from Denmark to Nullakai shelter. I think most people hitch this, but I'm stubborn, so I did it by road. So, yep, road walking, not my thing. Next one is who would I recommend the trail for? And I think anyone who was looking for a first through hike to do, I think this is the perfect introduction to through hiking. It's a decent distance, so 1,000 kilometres, anywhere from a month to some people take 2 months. But it's got the nice safety factor, it's got the shelters, reliable water, and you're never too far from civilization, but you still get the feeling of remoteness at times, and there is a little bit of variety of terrain, but navigation's easy, logistics is easy, and yeah, the trails are pretty easy as well. So definitely a brilliant introductory through hike. And that's it for the summary of the Bibbulmun Trail. I probably won't get the Hyson Trail summary done for a while. I think my next video is going to be my upcoming adventure, which will be through hiking the perimeter of Korea and a little through hike in Sri Lanka as well. So that'll be next. Thank you for watching, and hope you enjoyed it.